Again, the escalator reaches the same place before you do. Rush hour. Humid air. People stacked behind one another in a DC metro station. The metal steps keep that steady clink under your shoes, and the yellow safety line sits there without opinion. You stand on the right so others can pass on the left. That looks small. It is not small. Because the question is not whether someone behind you is late, impatient, rude, important, or wrong. The question is whether your first impression gets to govern your body. The mind says, why should I move? My time matters too. And if you assent to that too quickly, the body becomes an argument. Epictetus would not start with the crowd. He would start with the ruling faculty. Responsibility begins before the step you take. It begins where the impression asks for permission. The first discipline is not moving faster. It is knowing what belongs to you while everyone else is moving. That is the clean line Epictetus would draw in the middle of the station. Not a yellow line on the floor first, but a line in the ruling faculty. Some things are yours. Some things are not yours. And confusion begins when the mind treats both as one field of command. The escalator is not yours. The rush hour is not yours. The humidity in the station is not yours. The person coming up behind you with a hard step and a sharper schedule is not yours. The delay on the red line, the meeting they are late for, the mood they brought from home, the email waiting in their inbox, the judgment they may form about you as they pass, none of that is yours. You may be standing in the same public space, but you do not own the minds around you. You do not own their urgency. You do not own their manners. You do not own whether they thank you, glare at you, brush past you, or treat the escalator like a contest. That is not surrender. That is accuracy. What is yours is smaller, and because it is smaller, it is stricter. Your judgment is yours. Your assent is yours. Your intention is yours. Your attention is yours. Your next response is yours. The way you occupy the right side of the escalator is yours. The way you notice the yellow safety line without turning it into a private throne is yours. The way you hear the clink of the metal steps without letting that sound become a command is yours. This is where responsibility begins. Not with controlling the flow of commuters. Not with deciding who deserves to hurry. Not with measuring your worth against another person's pace. Responsibility begins with the part of you that says, this is my body in this public place. This is my space for one moment. This is my choice. The false judgment says, if I yield, I become less important. That is the error. Standing on the right does not make you inferior. Letting someone pass on the left does not reduce your dignity. Public order is not submission. Courtesy is not defeat. The mind that confuses courtesy with humiliation has already placed its worth in the wrong location. Worth does not live in blocking the path. Worth does not live in proving that your time matters by making another person wait behind you. Worth does not live in forcing the world to acknowledge you before you act rightly. Character lives in the chosen act. On that escalator, the event is plain. People are moving through a crowded station. Some stand. Some walk. Some are late. Some are tired. Some are polite. Some are careless. The metal steps continue their clink. The yellow line remains where it is. The city does not stop to explain itself. Then the mind adds meaning. They think they are more important. They are rushing me. I should not have to move. My time matters too. Maybe your time does matter. But that fact does not decide your conduct. The question is not whether your life has weight. It does. The question is whether that weight gives you permission to treat a shared path as a personal claim. The boundary of control cuts through that confusion. You do not control the crowd. You control whether you become one more careless obstacle in it. You do not control another person's urgency. You control whether you interpret urgency as an insult. You do not control whether anyone recognizes your restraint. You control whether your restraint depends on being recognized. You do not control the rhythm of the station. You control whether your judgment falls into rhythm with irritation. And this boundary must be held repeatedly, because the same failure often returns in small forms. Not dramatic failure. Ordinary failure. The shoulder that drifts left because you are not paying attention. The bag that blocks the passing side because you feel crowded. The silent refusal to adjust because you want the world to notice you were there first. These are not crimes. They are tests of command. Epictetus would not ask whether the situation is annoying. He would ask whether annoyance is fit to govern you. He would ask whether the external has crossed the boundary, or whether you invited it in by calling it an injury. The yellow safety line can remind you of the division. There is what happens. There is what you add. There is what belongs to you. There is what never did. And once that line is seen clearly, the next section begins, and the only place action can begin: the impression that appears, the judgment attached to it, and the assent that quietly turns thought into conduct. Once the boundary is clear, the next mistake becomes easier to see. The event does not force your conduct. The impression appears first. Then the judgment moves in. Then assent either opens the door or keeps it shut. That sequence is the whole battlefield. You are on the escalator in a DC metro station. It is rush hour. The morning air is humid enough to make every coat and backpack feel heavier than it should. The metal steps keep making that steady clink underneath you. The yellow safety line sits at the edge of your attention, bright, plain, not arguing with anybody. Then someone comes up behind you on the left. Maybe you are already standing on the right. Maybe your bag hangs too far out. Maybe your shoulder has drifted over the passing side. Maybe you hear the pace behind you before you see the person. The mind receives the first appearance: someone is pressing forward. Someone wants room. Someone's urgency has entered your space. That first appearance is the impression. It is not yet truth. It is not yet duty. It is not yet insult. It is only the mind's first report: movement behind me, pressure near me, clink of steps, humid crowd, yellow line, left side opening, somebody passing. Epictetus would tell you to stop there longer than habit wants to stop. Because the impression wants to become law. It says, this is personal. It says, they think their time matters more. It says, I am being pushed. It says, if I make room, I am admitting they outrank me. But none of that was in the event. That is judgment. The event is that a person is trying to pass on the left. The judgment is that their motion has authority over your worth. The event is a shared escalator in a crowded station. The judgment is that your dignity is now at stake. The event is a body behind you moving faster than yours. The judgment is that you must defend your place as if public order were a private contest. This is where the shadow enters. You do not have to say it out loud. Most people do not. It works quietly. My time is valuable too. I should not have to adjust. Let them wait. Why should I be the one who moves? The words sound reasonable because they borrow language from fairness. But they are not examining fairness. They are protecting ego. They are turning a narrow strip of escalator into proof of personal importance. That is the value error. Speed, space, convenience, and recognition have been inflated above the ruling faculty. The mind is given an external more authority than examined choice. It has treated another person's pace as if it could decide your dignity. It has treated a few seconds of friction as if they could command your next action. Then comes assent. Assent is the quiet yes. It may not feel like a decision because it happens quickly. But it is a decision of the ruling faculty. It is the inward agreement that says, that impression is true enough. That judgment may govern me now. You assent when your shoulder stays wide on purpose. You assent when your bag remains in the passing lane because you refuse to notice it. You assent when you let irritation stiffen your posture. You assent when the next small movement becomes a message: I will not make room. The body obeys the judgment you accepted. That is why responsibility begins before the visible act. A blocked path is not merely a blocked path. It is often assent made physical. A deliberate refusal to shift is often a judgment walking in public. A tiny act of civic disorder can reveal a larger inner confusion: the belief that your worth must be defended by obstructing another person's movement. This does not mean every person on an escalator is morally corrupt. That would be foolish. People are tired. People are distracted. People carry bags. People lose attention. The Stoic question is not whether you made a small mistake. The question is whether, once you notice it, you defend the mistake as identity. That is the trap. The mind would rather protect the judgment than correct the action. The yellow safety line is useful because it gives attention a place to return. Look at it. Not dramatically. Not like a symbol painted for your private awakening. Just look. It marks where the foot should not cross. Let it also remind you where judgment should not cross. The event may reach your senses. It may not govern your assent. The clink of the steps may press the mind to react. It may not decide your response. The person behind you may be impatient. That does not require you to become stubborn. The station may be crowded. That does not make your conduct ungovernable. Now the sequence can be corrected. Impression: someone is moving quickly past me. Judgment tested: this does not prove my time is less valuable. Assent refused: I will not let ego turn a shared path into a contest. Action chosen: stand right, keep the left clear, Carry my bag close, move with order. Nothing grand is required. No one needs to applaud your restraint. No one needs to know that you caught the impression before it hardened into conduct. The work is internal first and visible second. This is why Epictetus matters in ordinary public life. He does not wait for a courtroom, a funeral, a crisis, or a betrayal. He meets you where the judgment actually appears, in the humid rush hour, with metal steps clinking under your shoes, while the yellow safety line asks nothing except that you pay attention. And from there, training begins. Training begins where the scene is still small enough to dismiss. That is why it matters. Nobody builds a discipline-ruling faculty only in the moments that look serious. You build it in the public place, in the morning crowd, while your mind is tempted to treat a minor inconvenience as a personal injury. You build it when the humid air makes you impatient before anyone has done anything wrong. You build it when the metal steps clink beneath you and the body wants to answer pressure with pressure. Ascesis is not performance. It is practice. It is the repeated correction of a judgment before the judgment becomes conduct. So the practice on the escalator is plain. First, pause. Not a dramatic pause. Not a speech inside your head. A half second is enough. The person behind you is moving quickly. The station is crowded. The left side needs room. Before the shoulder stiffens, before the bag stays wide on purpose, before the face hardens, pause. That pause is not weakness. It is the ruling faculty taking attendance. Second, name the impression. Do it cleanly. Someone is trying to pass. Not, someone is disrespecting me. Not, people are selfish. Not, I am being treated as less important. Just this, someone is trying to pass. The shorter the sentence, the safer the judgment. The mind becomes dangerous when it decorates the event too quickly. It adds motive. It adds insult. It adds rank. It adds a private trial where no evidence has been examined. Third, return to the anchor. See the yellow safety line. Let it bring attention out of the argument and back into the actual place. You are not in a courtroom defending your worth. You are not in a workplace meeting fighting for credit. You are not at a family table being ignored. You are on an escalator in a DC metro station during rush hour, and the yellow safety line is telling you where the body belongs. Anchor the body, and the mind often follows. Place your feet clearly. Keep your right side. Bring your bag closer. Leave the left open. This is not complicated, which is why the ego resists it. Ego prefers grand tests because grand tests can be narrated. Small tests only expose whether you can obey a simple standard without applause. Fourth, separate the event from the judgment. Event, a traveler wants to move faster. Judgment, their urgency means my time is being lowered. Event, the clink of the steps makes the moment feel pressed. Judgment, I must answer the pressure with refusal. Event, my shoulder is near the passing side. Judgment, moving it means surrender. That is where the false assent hides. It does not announce itself as vice. It borrows the language of self-respect. It says, stand up for yourself. But self-respect does not require blocking a public path. Self-respect requires governing the part that wants to turn every friction into a claim. Fifth, shrink the task. Do not try to become a wise person on the escalator. That is too large and too vague. Choose the next governable action. Shift the bag. Keep right. Let the person pass. Do not mutter. Do not perform irritation. Do not demand recognition. The next action is the training ground. You do not control whether the other person is grateful. You do not control whether they are rude. You do not control whether the train is delayed anyway. You control whether your action is orderly when the external remains ordinary, crowded, and inconvenient. Sixth, watch the shadow without obeying it. The shadow says, my time is more valuable. Or maybe it says something softer, I am tired too. I am tired of always being the one who adjusts. That sentence may feel convincing because life does ask repeated adjustments from you. Work does. Family does. Bills do. The city does. But this is where Epictetus would press the point. The fact that you are tired does not make a false judgment true. Fatigue is a condition. It is not a lawgiver. You can be tired and still fair. You can be crowded and still attentive. You can be unseen and still governed. Seventh, repeat without congratulating yourself. The practice is not complete because you made room once. Another morning comes. Another station. Another person behind you. Another humid platform. Another clink of the metal steps. The same impression returns wearing the same old disguise. This is about me. Train the refusal. No, this is about conduct. No, this is about assent. No, this is about the part of me that can still choose. And when the escalator reaches the top, the lesson does not end. It follows you into the hallway, through the fare gates, into the office, into the inbox, into every place where the mind mistakes inconvenience for injury. The practice is simple because the error is simple. You notice. You name. You return to the yellow safety line. You separate. You choose. You repeat. That is ascesis inside the scenario, not escaping the crowd, not judging the crowd, not winning against the crowd, but learning to keep your ruling faculty from becoming part of the disorder. Conduct is what remains when the crowd does not become easier. That is the point. Responsibility does not wait for perfect conditions. It does not wait for a calm platform, a polite stranger, a lighter bag, cooler air, or a morning when everyone in the station behaves exactly as you prefer. If your standard only holds when the setting is convenient, then the setting is governing the standard. Epictetus would not call that freedom. He would call it dependence. You stand on the right because that is the ordered conduct of the place. You leave the left open because other people may need to pass. You keep your bag close because your body is not the only body using the space. You do not need a sign praising your discipline. You do not need the person behind you to deserve your courtesy. You do not need the crowd to be noble before you act with order. This is duty in public life. Not a grand duty. Not a heroic duty. A small one. But small duties are where the ruling faculty is either trained or excused. The mistake is to think responsibility begins only when the stakes are large. A court date. A family emergency. A job loss. A medical bill. A public failure. Those things matter, and they test a person. But the faculty that meets them is being shaped earlier, in ordinary places, by ordinary assent. If you practice carelessness in small public moments, do not be surprised when carelessness becomes available under pressure. If you practice making every inconvenience personal, do not be surprised when larger obstacles feel like insults. If you practice using your body as a protest against reality, do not be surprised when conflict follows you into rooms where the cost is higher. The escalator is not morally important because of the escalator. It is important because it reveals the rule you are living by. One rule says, I will act rightly only when I feel respected. Another rule says, I will act rightly because right action is mine. Those are different lives. In the first life, other people hold the key. Their tone decides your tone. Their hurry decides your obstruction. Their lack of gratitude decides your next refusal. Their impatience becomes permission for your impatience. You are still standing on the escalator, but your governing faculty has been handed out to strangers. In the second life, the external remains external. The person behind you may be rushed. The train may be late. The humid air may make the crowd restless. The metal steps may keep pressing the clink into your attention. Still, your next act remains yours. You can keep right. You can make room. You can carry yourself without turning courtesy into submission or irritation into policy. This is not about pleasing people. That must be clear. Stoic conduct is not servility. Standing on the right is not bowing to the urgent traveler. Letting someone pass is not saying their life is worth more than yours. Courtesy is not a confession of inferiority. Order is not weakness. The duty is not to be liked. The duty is to be governed. That means you do not act from fear of judgment, and you do not act from hunger for approval. You act from the standard that belongs to your own ruling faculty, fair, attentive, measured, useful, and clean of unnecessary ego. The yellow safety line is still there. It does not flatter you. It does not accuse you. It marks a boundary. The foot belongs on one side. The danger belongs on the other. In the same way, responsibility marks a boundary in the mind. Your intention belongs to you. Your assent belongs to you. Your next response belongs to you. The timing of the train does not. The mood of the commuter does not. The reputation you imagine in a stranger's mind does not. When you confuse those things, conduct becomes unstable. When you separate them, conduct becomes possible. A person may push past without saying excuse me. That is theirs. You do not have to answer with contempt. That is yours. A person may walk on the left as if the whole station were built for their deadline. That is theirs. You do not have to block the path to prove a point. That is yours. A person may be wrong in tone, wrong in pace, wrong in manners. That is still not authority over your judgment. Responsibility is not the burden of making the station just. It is the duty of not adding your disorder to it. That is a hard sentence because the mind wants a loophole. It wants to say, but they started it. It wants to drag conduct into a courtroom where every small action must be justified by someone else's failure. Epictetus cuts that off. Another person's error is material for your training. It is not permission to abandon your own post. Your post is not the escalator. Your post is your own assent. So act from there. Keep right because order is better than ego. Let pass because space is shared. Notice irritation because unexamined irritation becomes command. Hold the bag close because attention is part of respect. Leave the left clear because responsibility often looks like making the next person's burden no heavier than it needs to be. And when no one thanks you, nothing has been lost. The act was never purchased with gratitude. The act belonged to character before it entered public view. That is how responsibility becomes freedom, not by controlling the crowd, but by refusing to let the crowd control the part of you that chooses. Freedom begins when the escalator stays the same and you do not need it to change before you govern yourself. The crowd still presses forward. The humid morning still clings to your shirt. The metal steps still clink under your feet. Someone still wants to pass on the left. The yellow safety line still holds its place without explaining itself. And you hold yours. That is the quiet victory Epictetus points toward. Not victory over strangers. Not victory over the station. Not victory over the city's impatience. Victory over the false authority you almost gave to an impression. You saw the event. You tested the judgment. You refused the trap. You chose the next right act. That is enough. A free person is not someone who never feels the pressure of public life. A free person is someone who does not hand the ruling faculty to that pressure. The late train does not own you. The hurried commuter does not own you. The imagined insult does not own you. The small temptation to block the path does not own you. You stand right. You keep the left clear. You let the world move without demanding that every movement confirm your worth. And when you reach the top of the escalator, you carry the same discipline into the next room, the next hallway, the next argument, the next duty. The rule is not about escalators. It is about where responsibility actually begins. Return to what is yours to govern.